So welcome to the Movie Heaven, Movie Hell podcast extra with me, Simon Aitken, and
And I'm Keith Eyles, and I'm really pleased to say that we have a very special guest joining us from California today. We have Kenneth Johnson, who is a very Emmy Award-winning television writer, director, producer, series developer, etc. That was, along with Glenn Larson and Donald Bellisario, was one of the influential names when I was growing up. So welcome, Kenneth Johnson.
Thank you, guys, and please, it's Kenny. My father's name was Kenneth Johnson. I was a junior, so I was always known by the family as Kenny, and that sort of stuck. And all of my family and friends and crew and cast always call me Kenny. At least that's what they call me to my face. So behind the screen scenes, I'm never too sure, but it's always been Kenny.
Well, thank you, Kenny. We're very pleased to have you join us today. I know myself and Simon, we often talk about in these podcast extras things that inspired us and sort of got us into becoming filmmakers ourselves. And one of the things, television series, both in the past and even nowadays, are as influential to us as movies themselves. And like I said, myself and Simon, we were both born in the 70s. So we kind of grew up watching reruns of your work over in the UK and in I guess, the early 80s, right, Simon?
That's right, yes. We used to watch The Incredible Hulk and V, even though I don't think we were supposed to be watching V.
Well, that's it's okay. I'll take that, and I'm delighted that you were there. It's funny. I go into meetings occasionally with studio executives nowadays, and they go, "Wow, man, it's so cool to meet you. I grew up watching your stuff, And I usually say, yeah, well, I grew up making it. I was the at the time I was at Universal. I was the youngest writer, producer, director on the lot. And incidentally, the lowest paid probably as well. But my pals, Stephen Bochco and Steve Cannell and Don Bellisario, we all sort of thought of ourselves as the class of 1980 at the Universal University, and because it really was like doing graduate school with pay when I was there. When I first started producing episodic television, it was because Steve Bochco, who had been at college with me, introduced me to a guy named Harve Bennett, who was producing The $6 Million Man. And they were bereft of ideas and in a big hurry to get scripts. And that's when I said, well, how about The Bride of Frankenstein? And Harve said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you've got this monster sort of man with these, bionic legs and eye and arm and stuff. Shouldn't he have a mate? And Elsa Lanchester, And he said, like a bionic woman. And he said, that sounds good. And and we hit it off. And Harve very quickly invited me to become a producer at Universal. And I was flattered, but I said, Harve, producing's kind of a pain in the ass. I really sort of prefer writing and directing. Can't I just do that? And Harve sat me down and said, Kenny, let me explain to you how television works. He said, in TV, the producer is the guy that controls the whole quality of the project. The producer hires the writer. The producer hires the director. I said, stop right there, Harve. I get it. I'll take the job. And that was it was true. I jumped on board and hired myself to write and kept trying to hire myself to direct, but there was never enough time to do it because Bionic Woman quickly spun off into its own separate series. And for a while, I was writing and producing both series at the same time. And I mean, talk about living in a garbage disposal. It was challenging, but I'm glad that you remember it well.
Yeah, for me, I mentioned in an earlier podcast that we did, one of my sort of earliest memories and one of the things that got me fascinated about television as a child was, some of the latter episodes of The $6 Million Man. And what they did here in the UK was when I moved back from the US, which was in the sort of early noughties, around 2000 or whatever, before I moved to London, the first thing I did was buy a big screen TV, and Sci-Fi Channel, they used to do a 4-hour slot every day where they had basically $6 Million Man, followed by Bionic Woman, followed by The Incredible Hulk, followed by Wonder Woman. And they literally, I used to record this and they'd have it on every day. And because most of those shows ran sort of 3 to 5 seasons or whatever, they were all, it was like a syndication package. So they were all in chronological order and they all finished around the same time. But what it meant is within 6 months, I'd seen everything. And I remember, like, for example, I was really, Jaime Sommers, who I know is one of your creations, the Bionic Woman, I couldn't believe it when she died the first time round in the TV show, because I had no idea. When I started watching the show, she was already established. Martin Brooks was Rudy Wells, and they had all the bionic sounds and everything. So to go back and watch the older episodes was a real education, you know?
That's that's true. I don't know. You may have heard or read somewhere else that when I originally wrote the screenplay for the Bionic Woman episodes on the $6 Million Man, it started as a single episode, and then they when I handed in the script, Harv said, "Well, we really like it, but it's too dense." And I said, "What do you mean? What do you want me to cut?" And they said, "No, we don't want you to cut it. We want you to make it longer." And I said, "You mean like, but you only have a 1-hour show?" And he said, "Well, we're going to do it as a 2-parter. I think it was the first time anybody had done a 2-parter on a 1-hour dramatic show." And I said, "That's interesting, Harv. Does that mean I get paid again?" And he said yes, and I was thrilled because it was the only money I had made all year. That year, it had been a really dry year, and in my original conceit, she died. I kept her alive at the end, sort of a deep freeze kind of thing, and and they said no, we want her dead. And I said, "This is a mistake, guys. You know, it's a great character, and you don't want to just kill her off. No, dead. That was Love Story, that movie with Ryan O'Neal and oh God, what's her name? Where she had died at the end of it. It had been a big hit, and so they all thought, "Oh no, we want to do Love Story. She needs to die, and besides, we don't want to have a lot of bionic people running around." And I said, "This is a mistake," but they said, no, dead. So I killed her off, cerebral hemorrhage, you know, all that. She was gone goose. And then we started getting letters as soon as the show aired, and from all over the country. But my favorite came from the head of the psychology department at Boston University, who said, "How dare you create this brilliant female archetype, this role model for young women, and just so blithely toss her under a bus." You know, and that impressed the network and the studio guys. But what really impressed them was the fact that when we did the Bionic Woman 2-parter, suddenly the ratings for the $6 Million Man shot way up higher than they'd ever been before, and so the network and studio suddenly thought, "Well, we really ought to continue this as a series. Why did you decide to kill her off anyway, Kenny?" And I said, "It was a stupid idea. Why'd you do that? Bring her back to life." Okay, guys. So I was challenged with creating some sort of, biological mumbo jumbo in order to bring Jaime back. And when we brought her back at the end of the summer, they reran $6 Million Man, and in those days that was always, they reran their summer stuff. And at the end, they ran the Bionic Woman and said, "Tune in next week for the return of the Bionic Woman." And holy cow, everybody in America tuned in, and it took $6 Million Man into the top 10 in the ratings for the first time. And it was so vastly popular that Fred Silverman called me almost immediately and said, "I want you to spin her off into a separate series, Ken." And I said, I wasn't sure I wanted to do that because wasn't having any time to direct. And when you're writing one show, it's bad enough. Suddenly they want you to write and produce 2 shows at the same time. It's like really, traumatic. But I took it on and was very happy. And your reference to the Sci-Fi Channel, you're right. It was so funny. They were running somebody told me they called it the Kenny Johnson block, where they'd run $6 Million Man. They'd run the Bionic shows in the afternoon, and then they'd run the Incredible Hulk in the evening. And then on weekends, they'd run V. And it's always amused me because over the years, I've taken them probably a half a dozen different projects, and never once have I ever been able to sell them anything, even though that I was sort of helpful to when they were first getting started. So, oh no, welcome to Hollywood, guys.
I was going to say, it sounds like Hollywood's not changed over the years one bit.
No, it's amazing. Everybody thinks they have the good ideas, and that's why they tried to revive the Bionic Woman a couple of years ago, and Peter Roth, who's the head of Warner's TV, was in his office, and he said, "God, we just saw the advanced tracking on the Bionic Woman. This is what they do before a show goes on the air. They go out to sort of sample audience awareness of it and how interested the audience is in seeing it, and they call these the tracking numbers." And Peter said, it's tracking humongous. It's going to be huge. I said, Peter, have you seen the pilot? And he said, no, but it doesn't matter. The numbers are phenomenal. It's going to be the biggest hit show in the history of Western civilization, And I'm saying, Peter, have you seen the pilot? And he said, no. I said, Peter, I've seen the pilot. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, it has the show has no humanity. It has no humor. It has no heart. And it certainly doesn't have an actress of the quality that Lindsay was when we did it. And they've missed entirely the essence of what made the show popular. No, it's going to be huge. Well, it was huge the first night that it aired, when everybody tuned in to see it, and they saw it, and wow, 30% of the audience, over a third of the audience actually, was gone the second week. And by the third week, another third was gone, and the show was canceled and crashed and burned after 7 weeks. And David Icke was the guy that had created it and produced it. And I don't know David personally, but I have a great respect for him as an artist, and even more respect after the Bionic Woman died, because he went out publicly and said, you know what? We blew it. We never knew what the show was about, and it didn't have any humanity or humor or heart. And it was like, he's a stand-up guy in my book for being able to cop to it, So
yeah.
It was sad
I mean, they'd come off the success of adapting very well Glenn Larson's Battlestar Galactica and reimagining that, which they did a great job of. But
yes, I thought it was better than the original show by a long shot.
Yeah, but they kind of missed the point with Jaime Sommers and sort of turned it into a mission of the week type series when we moved beyond that.
Right. It was they were sort of trying to do Alias or Buffy or something, and a lot of slow motion at night with her hair soaking wet. And how many times can we see her throw her hair in slow motion? And also the other thing that they did, when you're doing an episodic television show and you're on for several years, you usually get to the point where you do the evil twin, and we did it on the Bionic Woman. Lindsay had a dual role once where she played both Lindsay and the bad person that looked like Lindsay. We did it on the Hulk, where there was a gangster that looked like Bix. But in the pilot for the new Bionic Woman, there was Katie, what's her name, who was playing the bad Bionic Woman. And I said, that was another red flag, because clearly the people who were producing it and creating it did not trust the show that they had, nor did they trust their leading lady. And it was just very clear that, this is trouble in River City, guys, but it's, I was sorry that it didn't do better, but I could see from the first moment I saw the pilot, I thought, oh, no, this is not it, guys.
Kenny, what did you think about the remake of V?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, there have been a couple of them. First of all, there was after I did the original 4 hours, there was a 6-hour sequel that I had supervised the writing of, but I left Warner's before it was produced because we came to a difference of opinion in terms of the quality.
Okay.
And it did fairly well in the ratings, although the reviews were just eviscerating. For this was the 6-hour that became known as the final battle, or the final bugger, as I refer to it. And and I to this day, you may know, I have never seen it except for 30 seconds by accident. All of my friends who worked on it said that they the studio and the guys who took it over after I left totally changed so much of the script and the intent and the essence of the characters and stuff that all of my friends who worked on it said, Kenny, don't ever watch it. It will just drive you crazy. And then one day I was channel surfing. I don't know, this is about 5-6 years ago. And I came across, I saw this scene and I thought, oh my God, I know what this scene is, you know, and it was a scene that we had written for the final battle. And I watched them make every mistake they could possibly make in 30 seconds. And I said, oh God, I have to turn it off. All of my friends were right, you know. And they tried then in about 1985 to do a 1-hour episodic series, which again, I never saw any of. And my friends said, you don't want to. And the public agreed. They tuned out in a big hurry.
Oh,
and
big
then,
time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, over here in the UK, I remember this very well because I was really into it. It was in the summer of 1986. So I was on school holidays. So I was allowed to stay up to watch it. And what they did here in the UK, obviously this was a couple of years after it was made, I guess. You made it in 84 or whatever, yeah. But they showed it as a 10-hour miniseries over 5 days. So essentially what they did was they took your parts 1 and 2 for days 1 and 2, and then for days 3, 4, and 5 they showed the 3-part final battle. So they showed it all as one sort of epic adventure. And you know, I as a kid I thought this was absolutely fantastic, but of course when the hour-long episodes came like a year later, it was just silly things like they did away with the visitors' voices that you had. So suddenly any visitor could infiltrate the resistance, you know.
Which was exactly the reason that I created the voices to begin with, because I didn't want that ease of access, you know. I wanted to give them a hurdle that they were going to have to get past. And it's, it was, from what I heard, it was just sort of a mess. And then when they told me that in 2008, as a matter of fact, that was the meeting where I was at with Peter Roth, where he was raving about the Bionic Woman. That's when they were planning to try to do their own remake of my original V. And he just didn't want me to read about it in the trades, since I was not going to be involved with it. He just wanted to sort of let me know about what they were doing, and that it really had nothing that much to do with my original series. And I said, okay, well, you know, Warner's owns the TV rights, so you have the ability to do whatever you want in television, and Godspeed. The young man who had the idea, Jason Hall, called because he was interested in just sitting down and talking to me a little bit about it, and a very nice guy whom Warner's had hired to get them into the video gaming business. Jace had a very good success up in Seattle as a game creator and company maker. But after 3 years up at Warner's trying to get them into the video game business, nothing had ever happened. And so they decided, of course, to make him a producer in their infinite wisdom. And this was a guy, very self-effacing, charming guy, whom I walked into the room totally expecting to think he was an idiot. But by far he was not, and very respectful of me and the work that I had done and everything. And he freely admitted that he didn't know anything really about episodic television or anything, but he had this idea, which he had sold to Warner's and to ABC ultimately. When they told me about it in detail, I didn't think that it was really going to work, but it was not my place to say anything, so I just sort of stepped back and let them go with it. And unfortunately, it didn't. The same fate befell it as had befallen the Bionic Woman, which was there was a huge tune-in on the first night that it aired, about 15, 16 million people, which is a sizable audience nowadays. But the second week, a third of them went away, and the third week, another third went away, and then ABC pulled it off the air for several months and replaced all the writers and producers, and then they put it back on and gave it Lost as a lead-in, which was then their biggest show, right? Mm-hmm. And the ratings for V were even lower than they had been when they pulled it off the air. It was really a sad state of affairs, and finally it just crashed and burned and went away, and because it was not what we had set out to do. And the good news for me though was that it did attract such a big audience the first night, and the reason for that is because I have discovered a couple of years ago that I own and control the motion picture rights to any remake or movie sequels based on my original miniseries. And so Warner's owns the TV rights, but I discovered that I own the movie rights. And you know what happened? Suddenly I had a lot of new best friends. It's, well, again, welcome to Hollywood, and literally all of the major studios, Warner's, Universal, Paramount, Sony, MGM, United Artists, Lakeshore, Lionsgate, had meetings all over town. Everybody, hey, Kenny, sweetie, chicky, baby, want to talk to you about doing V. And I had a lot of meetings, and they wanted to. They all made very generous, that's putting it mildly, very generous offers to buy the rights to my original and to have me produce and maybe let me write. But as a director, they were thinking maybe, Michael Bay or somebody like that. And
no.
I said, no, guys, I really have to be in the director's chair, or I won't give up the rights. And so I said no to all of them. And this being Hollywood, they said, okay, we understand. How much money do you really want? And I said, no, you don't get it, guys. It's not about money. It's about protecting the quality of my creation. I've seen what happened when other people, even other talented people, got a hold of the Bionic Woman or the Incredible Hulk as the first couple of features they tried to do of the Hulk, and just totally screwed the pooch and missed the essence of it and made disasters of them. And I said, I would rather that V never got made as a movie rather than see it get made wrong by the wrong people. And so I backed away from all the major studio offers and a whole lot of money, because it was never what I was always interested in, storytelling and the quality, and on being on the stage and executing, making it happen as a director. So we've been endeavoring for the last couple of years to set it up as an independent picture with independent private equity financing. The budget's about right around $50 million. And we're looking for equity partners to help us make that happen. And the beauty of it is, particularly because I also wrote this novel called V: The Second Generation, which picks up the story 20 years later, and we see what's happened after our original encounter with the visitors. And so there's enough material in the novel to make at least 2 sequel movies. So what I'm really sitting on is a franchise of a big science fiction trilogy of 3 movies based on the original V, for which there is an enormous audience out there still. I get emails by the score every day from people all over the world. So we know that the audience is there, and we've just been looking for the funding. Hey, if you guys can help us find the 50 million, you get our money. And it's a big deal. We have 2 or 3 guys, 2 or 3 men and women that are working as finders for us, and the deal. You're laughing. I'm serious here.
Oh, we're laughing because we'd be lucky if we could raise 50 grand ourselves, let alone 50 million.
Listen, yeah, but that it's not. But I'm not looking for you to write me a check. What we're looking for is people that can help us find the money because of the basic, the huge intellectual property that V represents and the brand name that it's internationally known. And listen, whatever money our finders bring in from an equity source, they get 5% of the take. So it's on a $50 million picture, you can do the math. That's a pretty nice piece of change.
Yeah.
And that would help you guys get started and jumpstart. So if you know somebody or you know somebody that knows somebody, listen, we're open to anybody that can help us get it made the way we want it to get made and the way that I know that the audience wants it to get made. It's like when Bionic Woman went on the air, I got so many letters from people saying, what were they thinking? Why did this happen? And the same with the Hulk movies. It was, we were at the premiere, Susie, my wife and I were at the premiere of the first Hulk movie that was directed by Ang Lee, very good director. I'm very big fan of his work and have a great respect for it. But the movie was really terrible. The only line that got a rise out of the audience was the one that I had written as a joke. Don't make me don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. And it's funny. After the premiere, one of the reporters from Variety came up to me and said, "Mr. Johnson, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry."
Oh, very good, very good. Yes,
it was brilliant. It was brilliant.
no,
But
I
it's
mean,
sad. Yeah.
I mean, would love to see a V movie and love to be part of it. But sadly, myself and Simon are in the position where we don't even have a track record like you, and we can't raise money. So I feel your pain on that one. I have to say, I did watch the reimagined V, and I was, very disappointed with it, and I thought they'd missed the point of your show entirely. It seemed actually more like a remake to me of Quinn Martin's The Invaders than it did V. You know what I mean?
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, they missed loads. I mean, the only thing I liked about it, the only one thing I thought was good is they made it that the skin that the lizards were wearing was a bit like they've done in the Terminator franchise. It was a biological grown skin rather than a rubber skin, and I thought that was cool, but that was about it. Everything else I thought was bad, so it didn't work. It didn't work at all. So
that's what I'd heard. I only ever saw a bit of the pilot, and that was it. That was all I needed. Actually, once I heard how they were going about it, I thought, okay, well, good luck, guys. But anyway, we're holding out to try to give the public what they really want to see, and based on all the emails and stuff that I get from people that have said to me, we don't want that. We want to see the real deal. And the beauty of remaking V as a feature is that it's really a timeless story. It's not one that has to be rejiggered or reimagined because it's a classic tale like the Spartacus and the Revolt of the Slaves. Any story about an oppressed people that are fighting back, falls into the realm of a classic kind of timeless piece, and so it hasn't lost its impact. And we have good hope that you'll be able to see it on the screen.
That's cool. That's very cool.
I was just wondering, where did the idea for V come from?
A couple of places. I had read a novel by the American novelist Sinclair Lewis that he'd written in the 1930s called It Can't Happen Here, which was a novel about the rise of fascism in Germany and Italy happening in America, with the idea, well, it can't happen here, and of course it does. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting if suddenly we had a sea change, and unlike anything that had ever happened to us, and suddenly we woke up one morning in a different country. And my original screenplay was about a sort of a grassroots right wing that becomes fascist organization that slowly, insidiously wins its way upward until suddenly we wake up one morning and oops, we're in a different country. And I was having dinner with my friend Brandon Tartikoff, who was then president of NBC, and he asked what I was doing, and I mentioned this. And he said, "Oh, I want to read it." And I said, "No, Brandon, this is a feature. This is not television, And he said, "No, let me read it. And he read it, and he really flipped out for the idea of America under occupation. But he wasn't sure that Americans would understand fascism. And I said, "Well, it's not a complicated concept, Brandon. You put on a black shirt, you shave your head, and you beat somebody up." And he said, "No, but couldn't it be an outside source, like in those days the Soviets or the Chinese?" And I said, "Well, I don't believe they could sustain a protracted occupation." And I think his vice president, Jeff Sagansky, who later became president of NBC and Sony and a lot of other places, and a long-time good friend, but at that point he was kind of the young guy in the back of the room. "How about aliens, Kenny?" And I said, "Oh, no. I was trained in the classic theater at Carnegie Mellon University, where we studied Shakespeare and Strindberg and Sophocles and Aeschylus and the theater, and you create the Bionic Woman, and then you slide into the Incredible Hulk, and very soon the pigeonhole that you were placed in Hollywood gets narrower and narrower. And I just didn't want to do another larger than life alien kind of thing. But Brandon and Jeff said, "Just think about it. Kenny." So I went home and I thought about it, and I realized, holy shit, they're really right. I said, I can still do the story that I want to tell, because V was never about big spaceships or lizard people or all that. It was about power. The core of V is power. What do you do? How do you react when a uber power rolls into your life? Do you suck up to it like the Vichy French did in World War II, or do you just keep your head down, hoping they won't bother you if you don't bother them, yada? Or do you fight back against it like the resistance did? And they, of course, become the heroes of the piece. And I realized that I could still tell exactly the same story that I wanted to tell, but have all this visual eye candy of the spaceships and all of that sort of stuff, and the intriguing sci-fi element of it. And the fun thing about working in speculative fiction or science fiction is that you can work in allegory and a lot. And in the real time, the Nazis showed one face to the world and then revealed another face. And I realized I could do that quite literally, where they have one face, oops, but look what's underneath. And because of that, and because of the sort of the historic resonance that I tried to build into it, I think that's what gave it the substance and the depth that made it appeal, as we say, on a 4-quadrant basis. It appealed to everybody, young, old, male, female. And unusual in the world of science fiction, my audience, since the Bionic Woman, through the Hulk, through V, through Alien Nation, and virtually all the stuff that I've done like that, my audience has been as many females, often more females than males, tune in. And that's really unusual for science fiction, because it's thought of as 14-year-old boy stuff for the most part. And it's great when it has a broader reach than that. And I think it's because of that I've always been more interested in relationships and substance than in car chases and spaceships and stuff. That's just the stuff that gets people to tune in, maybe. But once they're there, they go, oh, I mean, a lot of the letters I get from people say, I was 10 or 12 or 15 when I first saw V. Now I'm late 20s, early 30s, or early 40s. And now I'm looking at it and going, oh, there was a lot more going on here than I realized,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a really good point, because one of the things that's always sort of fascinated me about your work, and as I said, I was kind of, even as a child, I was trying to understand what directors and what filmmakers and whatever did, and you always had created by or developed by in front of your name, and as I said, revisiting things like the Hulk, which when I was 7 or 8 years old or whatever it was, I used to wait every episode to see the eyes change and watch him Hulk out and all that sort of stuff. But then when I watched it in my 20s,
right.
I actually found that those bits, they were amusing and all that stuff. But the thing I was really into, and also because he played it so well, was the David Banner story, played wonderfully by Bill Bixby. And I sort of found that I'd be watching the episodes and really connecting to that storyline. And I've noticed that with sort of all of your work across the years, is they do sort of work on a multi-layer where, kids and 10-year-old boys and all this can love all the the action and the spectacle, but at the same time, a more mature viewer can kind of buy into those things also. And I'm guessing, looking at the fact that you wrote, produced, directed, created shows, developed shows, I mean, I guess you were what nowadays they refer to as a showrunner on most of these series. Would that be correct?
Well, yeah, the word showrunner wasn't around when I was doing it. The executive producer was the guy where the buck stopped. And nowadays, of course, you see television credits that have 45 producer credits on them, and you go, wait a minute, who's in charge here? And the person who's in charge is one of the executive producers, who happens to be actually there with his boots on the ground all the time. And that guy or woman is the person that's charged as the showrunner nowadays. But when we were doing it back before, there was the staffs were far smaller, and somehow we still managed to get the same work done. I've never quite figured out how we did it with only 4 or 5 people, and now it takes 20. It's a delight when you can create something and then be able to see it through. I mean, when I was first asked if I had any interest, Frank Price was running Universal Television. And the Bionic Woman was enormously successful. Both the Bionic Woman and 6 Mil, they were both in the top 3, and I was producing both of them. And so I was sort of the golden boy of the moment, you know. And Frank called me one day and said, "We've just acquired the rights to the Marvel Comics superheroes, Ken. Which would you like to do?" And I said, "Gee, Frank, none of them. I just don't deal well with spandex and primary colors, you know." And and I mean, I just couldn't connect with the Human Torch. I couldn't imagine, having a cup of coffee with Captain America in his, it's just, and particularly a couple of, well, I just said no. And he said, "Well, just think about it. And I was home trying to figure out how I could really be polite and say no to Frank. And my wife, Susie, had given me a novel to read that I had never read called Les Miserables. And I was very deeply into Victor Hugo's writing and to the fugitive character, Jean Valjean, trying to escape from the intrepid Inspector Javert. And I thought to myself, oh, rats, there's a way to take a little bit of Victor Hugo and a little bit of Robert Louis Stevenson's Jekyll and Hyde and this ludicrous thing called The Incredible Hulk and turn it into a psychological drama that was really based on Greek classic tragedy, where the hero brings down upon his own head the curse that he is then laboring under from then on. And I went back to Frank and I said, "All right, how about this? If I do the Hulk for you, I'd like to do it, and I'd do it this way, and I need to be left alone, and I need to be the one that decides on the casting. I don't want to have some second-rate actor shoved down my throat." "Okay, Frank, sounds good. Okay, so I want something else in addition, Frank." "Okay, what's that?" "I want to do a 4-hour miniseries based on Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe." I said, "This is a great swashbuckling novel of knighthood, and Robin Hood is one of the supporting players, and it's jousting and castles being stormed. That's great stuff. And I've always wanted to do something like that." "Sounds good, Ken. You're doing Incredible Hulk, and we'll do a 4-hour miniseries of Ivanhoe." "Okay, Frank." We shook hands on it, and I wrote the pilot for the Incredible Hulk in about 7 days. And everybody got out of the way, and I sent the script to Bixby, the one and only guy I sent it to, because I had seen his work on a couple of things that just blew me away. And he came on board, and we charged ahead, and the show went on the air, became a huge success. My pilot was released in Europe. You may not know this, as a theatrical feature, And I got a call from Universal one day, and they said, "Congratulations, you have the top-grossing motion picture in Europe." I said, "Wait a minute, what are you talking about?" And they said, "Your pilot for The Incredible Hulk, it's made like $16 million over there," which in the 1970s was a huge amount of money, foreign. And okay, well, I'm glad to know. And but of course, ask me if Ivanhoe ever got made. Frank Price unfortunately left the studio, and the hand that shook my hand was not there to be the hand to write the check when they didn't needed to do it. So, but nonetheless, we had a good time doing the Hulk, and we also we tried to delve into it. We tried to write the show sort of thematically. We were always looking for the way that the Hulk manifested itself in other people. I mean, in Bixby, his demon was anger. The enemy within was anger. In other people, they had a different enemy within. It might have been alcoholism. It might have been obsession. It might have been greed. It might have been any number of things. And so we tried to write the episodes from that standpoint. And we always were writing for an adult audience from the very beginning on my pilot all the way through the series. We always saw it as an adult show, and our largest audience was not kids. Our largest audience was women, and then men, and then teens. And so we had the perfect demographics, and it was a wonderful time. And I still miss my friend Bill Bixby to this day.
Yeah, no, he was wonderful. His portrayal was amazing, and for some time in the early days of sort of VHS home video over here, many of the episodes were only actually available sort of edited into feature length movies, obviously including your pilot. But there was,
right.
I think it was the episode called Married, which was the season 2 opener, and it was available called Bride of the Incredible Hulk, I think.
Yes, that's right. It was released as a theatrical feature over there. I have the poster. It was not my idea to call it The Bride of the Incredible Hulk, but of course, What are they trying to sell? Yeah, and Marriott was nominated for an Emmy for Best Actress in a Drama Series for that, and she won the Emmy
That's right.
for it. And it really startled a lot of people who had not bothered to turn on the show in town. And I remember, I think the Variety review when the show aired said something to the effect of, maybe it's happened while nobody's noticed, but The Incredible Hulk has become one of the best dramatic shows on TV. And that was very rewarding, because that's certainly what we were striving for. And something else happened too in the course of it, and that's that Louis Ferrigno. I really worked with him a lot to develop him as an actor, because to me, a lot of the most intriguing stuff happened when the creature. We never called him the Hulk, incidentally. We always called him the Creature. Only Jack McGee, the reporter, ever called him the Hulk. But some of the most interesting stuff for me was when the creature was coming down from his anger and was sort of that childlike, persona, and confused about what was going on around him in the world and everything. And those were intriguing. And Louis got to the point that he could really play all of that stuff that we would give him very handily. And it was really, really rewarding. Lou and I stay still in close touch, and he's a good friend, and he still looks very much the same as he did then. My God, he's as big as a house, and all still the muscles in tone. He's great.
Kenny, the one thing I always remember about The Incredible Hulk was the ending each time, when you see Bruce Banner sort of walking off and, always going off to that music. And I just wondered where the idea for that came from.
Yeah, it's funny. The musical piece, the Lonely Man theme, as we called it, it sort of became iconic in its own right. I don't know if you've seen the Family Guy, the animated show. The guy who created the show is a huge fan of the Hulk, obviously, because he's always doing send-ups, and including one day they did all their credits with their little character walking off into the distance to that music. They even cut a main title sequence, all animated, that's exactly like the main title sequence that I put together. It's hysterical. But when Joe Harnell had worked with me for many years as a composer, I met him back east when I was doing stuff back there, and then I brought him out here to do the Bionic shows with me. And when we were doing the Hulk, he said, "What are you looking for? What are you thinking?" And I said, "Well, look, what I want is a piece that is melancholy, that is not sappy and morose and overly sentimental, but rather that has a melancholia about it, that will draw people in." And in those days, at the end of every Universal television show, and most TV shows, there would be a big full orchestra score playing off through the credits. And I said, "Joe, this is about a solo guy going down the street by himself, and it really just ought to be, I think, a solo piano probably." And Joe called me and said, "Okay, I think I got something." And I went over and sat down with him on his piano bench, and he was playing it, and it was really, really, really close. And as always, I started meddling. And Joe always used to say I knew just enough about music to be dangerous, And I said, "Yeah, I think it's really close." I said, "What about if this note was flat?" And I showed him what I meant. And he said, "Oh, right. I get it. Okay." And he did that, and that's how it ended up. And as you say, I mean, people hear that piece of music, and it just draws them back into the character, into the loneliness, into the whole mood that we wanted to achieve. And it really became as iconic as the White Eyes, or as "Don't Make Me Angry, You Wouldn't Like Me," And it was and Joe did a brilliant job on not only on that, but on all of the music that he did for me through all the years.
Yeah, no, I mean, it truly is a beautiful and iconic piece of music, and obviously mixing the whole Hulk idea with the sort of fugitive type storyline, I always thought was pretty genius. What did Stan the Man Lee? What were his thoughts? I mean, did you meet Stan and have conversations with him about this?
Yeah, it did. Stan has been an old dear friend for many, many, many years, and has I'm so grateful. Had so many flattering things to say about our involvement together, and particularly on the Hulk. I when I told him early on that I said, look, I want to change the name from Bruce to David because I'm trying to get away from comic book, Stan. I'm doing everything I can to remove this from the comic book origins. I mean, I looked at the original comic book. The only thing I took from it was gamma rays and anger, because let's see, being too close to a gamma bomb. Okay, no, I don't think so. I said I've got to make it as real as possible, and also, again, I wanted to follow the Greek line of hubris of that false pride, where the hero is tampering with things better left to God, and the gods get angry when you do that, and so he has brought down the curse upon himself. It was important to me that classic aspect was there, and Stan got on board. He said, "Okay." He said, "I get it. I understand. You don't want Peter Parker, Lois Lane, Clark Kent, Lex Luthor." I said, "Right, exactly. I
how ironic that you got Bill Bixby though.
Yes, but it's not a crack up. Yes, Bill Bixby line, of course. It's too perfect. And but I said, look, Stan, on the tombstone I'll put David Bruce Banner. So I won't. He said, okay, that's fine. And the bigger struggle we had, and it wasn't with Stan so much as it was with the studio, or rather the network in the studio, was I wanted the creature to be red, not green. Because I said, why has he turned green? What is he, the envious Hulk? Is he the jealous Hulk? I mean, the color of rage, hello, is red. You're flushed with anger. You don't turn green when no, they stuck. And also, for my own sake, red is a human color, much more so than green is. And it just made more sense. I was trying to stay as logical as I could. I think the only real, and Stan was only ever as a consultant on it. He never tried to push or force anything down my throat or anything like that. The only real big argument we had was when I wrote the second 2-hour movie, which was called Death in the Family, where I wrote a scene where the creature had a fight with a bear, because I'm always looking for worthy adversaries. Beating up on a man is not, bear's better. Okay. Stan called me and said, I love it. It's great. It's so cool. A fight with a bear is great, but it ought to be a robot bear. I said, why would that be, Stan? And he said, well, that would be so cool. I have a robot bear. I said, Stan, let me explain. When you're doing a piece that's slightly beyond real, the audience will only buy so much. They will only give you so many buys. Okay. Now we're asking them to buy that Bill Bixby metamorphoses into Lou Ferrigno. I said, now this is a huge buy, Stan. If we put a robot bear into the mix, suddenly we're over the top and we're into comic book land. He said, no, but you do robotic stuff on Bionic shows. I said, well, yeah, duh. We're in the Bionic world, where the Bionic world is robotics. It's a natural transition to have fembots that you can believe that. But maybe, but certainly more so than robotic bears, where I'm trying to have this guy in the real world. And we went around and around about it, and I happened to be in New York in March of 78, because I had this fantasy of having the Incredible Hulk run through Times Square just to see if anybody would notice, and so I had gone back with a film crew and Lou to run Lou through Times Square for a sequence, because I really wanted to plant him in the real world, and you don't get more real than Times Square, So we were in the middle of shooting that, and we broke for lunch, and Stan's office was just a block over on 6th Avenue. And I said, oh, shit, I better go over and talk to him about this bear thing. So I went over and knocked on his door, and he said, oh, Kenny, come on, did you get my letter? I said, what? He said, oh, I sent you a special letter. I said, I just wanted to tell you that you were right and I was wrong. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you're right. Should not be a robot bear. You're doing it absolutely right. Just do what you're doing, and it's great. And that's how my relationship has been with Stan forever. I mean, there were times that he said, it's embarrassing almost to repeat it, but that he said he wished I had done all of his Marvel comic stuff. And I certainly do too, for that matter. but he's a great pal to this day and has more energy than anybody I've ever met. He's a great guy.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we're sort of coming to the end, but I would love to know about your involvement in Short Circuit 2.
Well, this came from my friend Jeff Sagansky, who was the one that said, "How about Aliens, Kenny?" At NBC. Jeff had gone on to become head of TriStar Pictures, and among other things, and we'd worked together a couple of times over the years when he was at CBS, and we would again later after TriStar. But he called me one day and said, "I got a movie I want you to do." And I said, "Well, okay, Jeff, I'm always, what is Short Circuit 2? We're going to do Short Circuit was a good movie. We're going to do a sequel. You'd be great." I said, "Well, Jeff, I really don't want to have my first movie have a number at the end of it, And he said, "Oh, come on, read the script. So I read the script and I said, "I don't think so." And he said, "Oh, come on. And he kept badgering me. He finally said, "Look, what's wrong? What's wrong with the script? Why don't you want to do it?" And I said, there's nothing really wrong with the script, except that right now, the way it stands, the robot is being, your leading man, the robot, is being used like a prop. You're getting a lot of laughs out of him, and they're very funny and some great sight gags. But what you're missing here, Jeff, is what you've really got is the Elephant Man. And he said, "What are you talking about? It's about a little robot." And I said, No. I know that. But what it's about is a stereotype. Don't you see? It's about people can't look past the surface to see the real soul that's burning inside him. It's like the Elephant Man, who had this terrible exterior and people couldn't see through. And he'd be saying, "Oh, I'm a man," but they couldn't see it. It's like Quasimodo in the Hunchback of Notre Dame. You can't see past the horrible visage to the human pure soul. I said, let me rework the script if the writers are up for it with them, and let me mine all of those human aspects of it, all of those stereotype aspects of it, and we won't lose any of the laughs or the sight gags, but we'll have a movie that will not only have people laughing, but we'll also have them crying for this little creature. And Jeff, in his typical fashion, said, "Yeah, sure, go ahead," and he loved what we did with the script, and suddenly we were shooting, and it's true, it was amazing to watch the audience reaction. The critical reaction was also terrific. One critic, this is a great one. One critic said it's the best movie sequel since, well, let's face it, since The Godfather Part 2. I said, "Oh, okay, I'll take that." It was a major critic that said it was like astonishing. But sitting in the audiences, it was the same thing. They were laughing right from the beginning of the movie, but by the time we got toward the end, where they were having to beat Johnny up, which was a very difficult scene for us all to shoot, actually, because we all totally, the three puppeteers that Jim Henson introduced me to, Rob, Gord, and Trish, who performed the puppetry on Johnny 5, were so brilliant that they could be standing 2 feet away from Johnny, and people would be talking to Johnny as though he were absolutely a living creature. And all of us on the set felt exactly that same way. He was a magnificent character, a real person. And a strange thing happened when the movie was over. It was like, I can still call Rob or Gord or Trish and talk to them, but Johnny's gone. It was like a friend had died when the movie was over. And I went through a real period of mourning after it, because he was such a real character that was so alive to all of us. And I still remember him, with great fondness. It was we had a huge amount of fun and fun together. And I think of him as a living, breathing character, which, is a testimony to their skills and all of our skills in the editing and every place else to really bring Johnny to life. And boy, he sure did. We were something I'm very proud of.
What happened to the Johnny 5 puppet when filming finished?
It's funny. When we were doing Alien Nation, Johnny was built by Eric Allard, a genius guy who is really great at all of those mechanics and everything. And Eric came back into my life a number of years later when we were doing Alien Nation, and my alien cop had to give birth to a baby, and and we had to create a realistic alien baby that would come out of his marsupial pouch in the front. It was quite a show, and it was a combination of Eric's work and Rick Stratton, our makeup guru on Alien Nation. And as a matter of fact, when the show aired, we got a lot of hate mail from people who said, "How dare you put makeup like that on a baby, on an infant?" You know. And
Oh wow!
I had to explain. that there were 7 men and women operating that infant. You know, it was really an amazing piece of technology. But I was over at Eric's shop one day while we were prepping it and just going through what we wanted the baby to look like, and I was walking past, and he had a whole sort of warehouse of stuff of things that he had done, and over in the dark corner, I just caught this glimpse of Johnny Five standing there. And I looked away immediately, because you know what it was like? It was like going to a funeral where the casket is open, and
Oh,
and the
okay.
person is there, but they're not there.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't look at him, because it was like, no, I have to remember him alive and laughing and making me laugh, and touching my heart the way that Johnny Five did in the movie.
Number
So
5 is alive, indeed. No,
yes,
absolutely.
yes.
On the subject of Alien Nation, I do have just something I want to ask you about that. I was obviously a big fan of the series when it originally aired here in the UK, which was sort of in the early 90s or whatever.
Right.
I've recently, because I've not seen them, I've recently treated myself to the DVD set of the 5 television movies you made as follow-ups,
Yes,
and
right.
you've done commentaries on them, which I'm quite excited about as well.
Yeah.
I haven't watched them yet, because my question is this: do I need to go and re-watch the 22 episodes of the series before watching them, or can I just dive straight into these TV movies?
Oh no, you can dive straight in, because the first one, Dark Horizon, picks up literally where the series left off. We were not expecting the series to be canceled, because it had gotten such extraordinary reviews. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Alien Nation, in its original incarnation and through all of the movies, never got a bad review from anybody. It was the critics just sort of adopted us as their little darling, and we loved it, and we saw that we had a show that had tremendous legs, because when Fox first asked me to look at the movie, the feature movie that had been done, that had not been successful, but they thought maybe there was a TV series in it. I didn't want to look at anything called Alien Nation, because again, I was sort of, no more aliens, and and it looked like sort of Miami Vice with cone heads, when I looked at the movie. And it was basically a police procedural with this little patina of alien stuff, and I just didn't, they thought I didn't really spark to it, and I was sitting alone in a screening room at Fox, and I was about halfway through and getting ready to sort of just walk away, and then this scene came up where the alien cop waved goodbye to his family, and there was one shot of them in the movie, only one shot, this alien woman and her little 2 alien kids standing on the porch, and the bell went off in my head, and I thought, wait a minute, who are they? And I went back to the Fox guys, and I said, okay, you think you've got Lethal Weapon with aliens, right? And they said, yeah. I said, no. What we have here is an opportunity to do In the Heat of the Night. I said, let me do a piece that's about racial prejudice and profiling and intolerance and discrimination. I said, that's something that can go on, and we can build a show around. And they didn't quite understand it, but they said, okay, go ahead. And we did, and the critics got it, and the audiences got it. And it was really, really a wonderful, wonderful experience. I put together a sensational cast with no assholes. Everybody was great, and we were really steaming along, and I had already several scripts written for the following season when we got the word that the show was not going to be picked up for another season. And I still remember Peter Chernin calling me and saying, "Oh, Barry Diller, who was then running Fox, said he wants to go with comedies on Monday night instead." There had never been anything on Monday night except us. We were the first time that Fox had a Monday night was with us and 21 Jump Street, and he canceled both Jump Street and us and decided he was going to put comedies on because they were going to get bigger numbers. And I said, "Peter, this is a huge mistake." And a year later, Peter got up in front of the Television Critics Association after the comedies had tanked so badly that Fox had to give Monday nights back to their affiliates because they had nothing to put on the air and the shows were awful. And Peter told the television critics, "The greatest mistake we ever made was canceling Alien Nation." And naturally, I was on the phone that afternoon going, "So, Peter?" And it took me 2 years of pounding on the door to finally get them to say, "Okay, you know what? We'll let you make a follow-up TV movie," because we had left the series with a lot of cliffhangers.
And I remember.
Yes, and Andy Schneider and Diane Froloff, his wife, had already written what was going to be the first episode, and we took that episode and expanded it out into what became the first of the 5 Alien Nation movies, Dark Horizon, which became the highest rated TV movie Fox had ever made. So suddenly they were inspired to buy 4 more. And that's how we got the movies. And for all of us, it was like a gift from the gods because we all adored working on the show. We adored the stuff that we were talking about. And as a matter of fact, on the DVD that you have, there is a special feature called A Family Gathering.
Oh, yes, I saw that. Yeah. Okay, I haven't watched it, but yeah.
you should absolutely watch it, and you can watch it first or last or whenever. But I just had every couple of years the whole gang would come over, and Susie and I would have a barbecue for them, and we'd all just get together and reminisce. And we've all stayed really closely together, tied as a family. And I was listening to them at one of the barbecues, and it was about the time I was about to put together the DVD release, and I called them all and I said, "Hey, how about you come back and sit in the living room and just talk about it like you were talking about it at the barbecue?" And so I did. They came to our living room, and we had 4 video cameras rolling, and just recorded them for an hour and cut it down to a half hour of stuff. My editor, Dave Strohmeyer, did a brilliant job piecing it together, and it's a wonderful piece. And you'll see why the show was so beloved by all of us, because we never stopped laughing. We had so much fun, and at the same time, we were talking about stuff that was important. We were getting awards from every minority in the country. Thought it was about them,
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so rewarding.
We just always end with how people can contact us. So how can people contact you, Kenny?
There's a website. They can Google me, Kenneth Johnson, and it'll almost always come up. But my website directly is www.kennethjohnson.us. And that's it.
Fantastic. And that's how I found you. So
yes. Right, there you go. And there's a contact Kenny or email Kenny link right there, and anybody can find me. And I do take time to answer my email because I appreciate people who take the time to write.
Thanks so much, Kenny. Have a good week.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Take care.